Hello, friends, and welcome back to the Bikes or Death podcast. As always, my name is Patrick, and I am your host. And I'd like to start off by thanking our newest patron members. These are all new sustaining members that have signed up since the last episode that came out last week. So we'd like to give a shout out to John, Rob Toe, Jacob Luz, Jeff Lutz, Serena Beachy, Ryan Butland, Sarah Pendergrass. Oh, this one's good. Stormin Hawk. That's a good name. Blake Davenport and Jean Sebastian Larac. Thank y'all so much. Really, the outpouring of support from over on Patreon has been really overwhelming and very much appreciated. So if you are liking these shows, if you like this kind of content and you want to step up to help them keep going and growing into the future, you can find all the information over at patreon.com/bikes-or-death. And I've set a new goal of quitting my day job and making Bikes or Death my full-time career. So if you'd like to join me and help make that a reality, you can learn more over there on Patreon. But that's enough about that. Okay, well, we got a long show today, so let's move right along, shall we? I want to give a huge shout out to today's sponsor, Backcountry Packraft Rentals. You can find them online at backcountrypackrafts.com. This trip and episode was literally made possible by Backcountry Packraft Rentals. They provided the packrafts that Sarah and I used on this trip, and I can tell you from firsthand experience that their service and quality of products was impressive. As we will be discussing on today's episode, the demand for packrafts is at an all-time high, and where you can find them, you might get sticker shock. They're kind of pricey, probably worth it. I mean, we're going to talk about this on the episode, but I recommend that you check out backcountrypackrafts.com if you're thinking about giving bike rafting or pack rafting a try. And I think you should. They have a large inventory of alpaca rafts along with all the gear and accessories that you need. I also found their Pack Rafting 101 series helpful as I was preparing for my first pack rafting trip, literally going in blind or just really gobbling up as much information as I could because I'd never done it before. So if you're thinking about giving it a try, if you want to go pack rafting or bike rafting, and hopefully this episode will help get you out there, go check out backcountrypackrafts.com, and patrons of this show get an additional 15% off their order. I also want to give you all a reminder about the Arkansas High Country Race. Nestled there in the Ozark Mountains of Arkansas, the bike-friendly community of Fayetteville is a picturesque mountain town located in the northwest corner of the state and is surrounded by some of the highest peaks in the mountain range. Fayetteville's backyard is the Ozark National Forest with 1.2 million acres of public land with countless miles of canopy-covered gravel roads and backcountry single-track trails. For race fans, Fayetteville is excited to once again be the host community for this year's Arkansas High Country Race. It's a 1,000-mile ultra-endurance bikepacking race that starts and finishes from Fayetteville's historic downtown square beginning October 9th. Home to bikepacking gravel routes big and small, consider Fayetteville as a hub for your next bikepacking adventure. Registration for this year's Arkansas High Country Race opens June 1st. Find out more at experiencefayetteville.com. I also want to tell you about my friends over at Hefe.bike. That is Hefe, HEFE.BIKE. Not just another e-commerce bike store. Hefe.bike carries products specifically designed with bikepackers and gravel enthusiasts in mind. That's you. With brands like K-Lite, Jayhawker carbon wheel sets for bikepacking and gravel, and Curve Walmart bars, which are where I got mine and the ones I use on my Fargo. So check out these and other products that they have over at Hefe.bike. And ding, 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 patrons of this show get an extra 10% off. Incentive. All right, everybody. Well, let us get to the show. Today's episode is one that I'm really excited about. Again, we're trying something a little bit new. I originally reached out to Ryan and wanted to interview him. And I know he lives a really, to me, a fascinating lifestyle and something I'm interested in. But it quickly turned into a bike rafting trip. And so we're taking it a completely different direction. This episode, I hope, is a nice blend between an interview plus some good information. And this is one of those episodes where I intended it. In my mind, I was thinking, oh, it'll be about an hour and a half. But I think Ryan and I became pretty good friends on the trip. And since we're recording this episode a couple weeks after, it was good to just catch up. And a couple times we went down a few rabbit holes, especially at the end, that we kind of were conversations that we picked up on that we continued from going on this trip together. And so it's kind of a tangent. We throw in a couple tangents in there. I wanted to mention that if you really want to just find the information about bike rafting or bikepack rafting, I've time-stamped everything in the show notes. And so if you're looking for a particular topic, or if you want to revisit this episode at a later date, I've tried to make it easy for you so that you can just find exactly what you're looking for. I hope that helps to make this episode enjoyable and also a good resource for your future bike rafting trips. Of course, we can only speak from our experience, and mine was extremely limited, but we did learn a lot. And so this is kind of hopefully a beginner's guide to bike rafting with some a little bit more expertise sprinkled in from our friend Ryan Stoyer. I hope that you enjoy this episode as much as I enjoyed making it. And that includes the trip that we went on that you're about to hear about. I really enjoyed getting to know Ryan. This community never ceases to amaze me. It's made up of some of the most amazing human beings on planet Earth, some of the most interesting people doing the most interesting things in the most interesting ways. And so I'd like to introduce the most interesting, or one of the most interesting men in adventure sports, Ryan Stoyer. Take it away, Miles, with the Bikes or Death theme song.
You load up your bike, you ride away from home. You could be with your friends or you could be alone. You ride for a day or maybe more. You just love being in the great outdoors. Everything you need is strapped to your bars, including that new pillow you got from Santa Claus. And then you think, oh shit, to yourself. You left that super lightweight tent on the living room shelf. Bikes or death. Bikes or death. Podcast.
All right, everybody. Today on the podcast, we got the Stoyer effect, aka Ryan Stoyer, calling in from, where are you calling in? I can't say the name.
I'm in the infamous LJ, Georgia.
Oh, man. I've gotten so much slack or crap for not being able to say it right. So LIJ, Georgia. Close enough?
Yeah. Ella J.
Ella J.
Like Ella J.
Ella J. I think people are going to be happy if I can finally get it right. I don't want to make the internet too mad, you know? There's enough hate in the world. I don't need to contribute by not getting Ella J right. Hey, I did it. Ella J.
There it is.
It just rolled off the tongue. Well, dude, thanks for joining me on Zoom. Just to kind of fill in the gaps for people listening, we recently did a bikepack rafting or bikerafting trip to Northwest Arkansas. And it was the byproduct of me reaching out because you're building a tiny house out of all these materials that you sourced. And we'll get into that a little bit later. But I was like, man, this is cool. I like the lifestyle. And you're like, yeah, but how about we go bikepack rafting? I was like, okay, let's do that. So
yeah, that was the one condition.
The one condition. It was a good condition. I appreciate you you challenging me in that way, you know, because it's something I've never done. And, you know, from your perspective, I didn't realize this. That was your first bike ride / bike trip since having your bike stolen like almost a year ago. Is that right?
Yeah. So it was a good 8 or 9 months ago now. I picked up my new bike from the bike shop that morning that I then drove 10 and a half hours to Arkansas.
Yeah. Yeah. And then that was like your first bike ride.
Yeah, it was the shakedown. I was as off the couch as it gets, and it was great.
Yeah, it was great. It was definitely, the whole thing was an adventure in that there was 4 of us on the trip. 3 of us had never pack raft. You were fresh back to cycling, your first like kind of big trip back since having your bike stolen. But overall, man, it went pretty well. We had some weather and some cold and stuff, and again, we'll talk about all that. But have you finally dried off and warmed up since then?
I have. Yeah, I'm finally dried out, man. I was chilled, shivering like half the way home.
Oh my gosh. For real, man. Like it took a while to recover from just being in cold and wet for essentially 3 days, especially that first 2 days were pretty brutal. But yeah, so instead of, we talked about originally it was going to be, hey, we'll do the trip and then we'll do a trip report. And we were just so freaking hammered afterwards that I don't think either one of us were too motivated or had the mental space to record an episode and have it be intelligible at all. So
I was borderline delirious by the end of it. Yeah, I was like pre-symptomatic for pneumonia. I was like really not on my A game. So I figured the listeners deserve better.
How did you feel afterwards? Like the drive home and everything? Were you really like hit pretty hard?
Yeah, the drive home was a little rough, and my phone was completely, unfunctional, waterlogged. So I navigated the interstate system without GPS, so I think it was a minor accomplishment.
Welcome back to 1990.
Yeah, didn't even have a MapQuest or anything to guide me. But yeah, no, I was not feeling great on the drive home, but got tons of sleep that night finally, and yeah, bounced back pretty all right the next day.
Did you sleep on the way home, or did you just make a straight shot?
I did. I drove until about midnight. Might actually have been like 1 a.m. and then found a place in Arkansas, just off the highway on a side street. I think I slept in the parking lot of a bank. Yeah. And then got up and that was it.
So I drove on the way home and I made it 2 hours, or no, sorry, till 2 a.m. And I only had like 2 hours left to get home. So I would have got home at like 4 a.m. But I don't like to push it. I'm a night owl anyways. So staying up till 2 a.m. isn't that big of a deal. But I started to get sleepy. And so I pulled into a church parking lot and finished off the other 2 hours in the morning. But it was a real adventure. For people listening, at first I wanted to like get really into, your tiny house and all that. But as I've done this first bike rafting trip, I've learned how cool it is, how fun it is, and it's worth talking about on a podcast at length. And B, there's not a lot of information. It's still like super new. So let's get to know Ryan a little bit, and then let's hop over and talk about bike rafting to the ability that we can and tell people what we know.
Yeah, so there's a lot to unpack about pack rafting.
Good one. Ding. So, Ryan, where do you live?
I live in LJ, Georgia. I've been living here for, I guess, about 5 months now. Before that, I spent 3 years in Asheville, North Carolina, and I really traced my my bikepacking roots to Asheville specifically. But I am a Georgia native originally, raised just outside of Atlanta.
So, but where, like, what kind of dwelling do you live in?
Oh, yeah. So
that's a multi-layered question.
Yeah. So I live in a 144 square foot tiny home. It's a 12 by 12. And yeah, I built it this winter and spring, out of almost entirely salvaged materials. Yeah. And just with a ton of help from friends and, community members that I met after I moved here. And yeah, put it together and it's great.
What kind of materials did you use? I mean, I know you like almost all of it was recycled or reclaimed or.
Yeah, the only new materials I used really were about half of my insulation and like the plywood that I used for subflooring and sheathing. So I framed it out like stick framing, but all my building materials that I salvaged were from actually a large stables that were behind the local bike shop here. So shout out to Cardique Bikes. They've been absolutely awesome, letting me go back there and help them tear down this huge barn essentially that is on their property, and they're expanding their backyard bike park, and they wanted to reclaim that property so we can have a larger area for the pump track. So my framing materials are actually 40 to 50-year-old dimensional lumber that's 2 inches by 6 inches, not like a 2x6 that you would pick up at Lowe's or Home Depot these days. They are fat, chunky, robust, 2 inches by 6 inches solid.
So do those automatically come with their own like higher insulation properties, I would assume?
Probably to some degree.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not an engineer, but
they got a little bit more thermal mass, I imagine.
Thermal mass, yes. Dude, so where did you get like the idea to do it? I mean, stuff like this really appeals to me when people build like the life that they want, or you literally built the home that you wanted the way you wanted to build it with your own hands. Like, I love it when people create what they want, you know. Actually, we could segue into your maker space and give them a shout out too. But
oh yeah.
Anyway, you're all about making things.
It's all part of the same picture. You know, I feel like a lot of people have a vague impression of, gee, it would be cool to like build my own home one day. And that's just something that I vaguely had in the back of my mind growing up and, you know, in my young adulthood as well. And so I've spent the last 3 years essentially being a full-time dirtbag living out of the back of my Tacoma. And it's been great. And I'm still going to be doing that several months out of the year, especially in the summer. But housing security is really nice too, especially during the winter time. And so I've got my best friend in the world, Andrew Roach, and his wife, Amber. They own the coffee shop here in LJ, Georgia, and they've got a house not far from here as well. And Andrew and I used to run a record store together back in Marietta, Georgia. Been best friends for like 10 years. And they opened up a record store here in the coffee shop, and we've started talking about opening up that maker space, which we can talk about that more in a little bit. And, you know, they asked me if I wanted to come be involved again. And I was like, absolutely. I need a place to live. Can I build a tiny home in your backyard? And they were like, sure. So, you know, my dad always says your friends will take you places you can never go on your own.
That's
and
beautiful.
I think that's really, really good advice.
How long did it take you to build it from, you know, concept and permission to permission granted, and then now you're living in your house? How long did that take?
So I showed up in town like December 6th or something of 2020. And we had already basically agreed that I would be building something. I hadn't drawn up the plans yet. And then I was searching for materials, and that was kind of just one obstacle after the other. I was looking at buying barns and driving an hour each way to dismantle stuff. And, you know, I've got a 4-cylinder truck, so I can't really pull a trailer full of lumber. And I, had all these issues of, how on earth am I going to do this? And then I found out the bike shop just has this large structure they're trying to get rid of. And the bike shop is, a block or two down the street from the coffee shop here.
Nice.
And, walking distance, bike distance. So once I got in there and I started tearing down materials and stuff, I realized, okay, this is just about everything that I need. And it was about 6 weeks of construction between me, my good friend Moses, who I couldn't have done this without, local guy, my friend Kelly, who has let me borrow all his power tools and stuff. And then a couple other people just in and out, throwing in a couple days at a time. 6 weeks, and we went from foundation to inhabitable, but still not done yet. I've really been slacking ever since it's been comfortable enough to live in.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, you kind of slow down. You probably want to take a break, man. 6 hard weeks of building it. You probably just want to like enjoy it for a hot minute.
It was every single day, rain or shine. We hung a 20-foot by 30-foot tarp over the construction area so we could work in the rain. Yeah, it was pretty draining. So after that initial 6 weeks, it's been great.
How rewarding was it to sleep there your first night?
It was surreal. It still is unreal. I've only been staying there maybe 2 months now, and it's like a treehouse. It's like a clubhouse. It's just fun. So it's unbelievable.
Well, I can imagine going from your truck to, a tiny house that, it's like going into a mansion, and we got to mention your tub. So if you follow him on Instagram, half of his Instagram stories are just him sitting in his outdoor tub, listening to music.
Yeah, I've got a clawfoot tub with a propane powered tankless water heater. So it's just on demand. I've got my 20-pound cylinder there and fire that baby up, just running a garden hose into it. And I'm out there in the trees and the forest, and the birds are always singing, and it's so relaxing.
Yeah, it looks pretty sick, man. Congrats to you. I just love it when people, you sacrifice for a few years, you live in your truck, you like source all the materials for free, you get your friend to, let you build. You like built this thing for next to nothing, and now you have a house,
Yeah,
pretty cool.
I think the total dollar amount on it was right around $3,000, and that's pretty darn good. I've got windows that are 3 foot wide by 6 feet tall. I've got 4 of those on the downstairs and more windows upstairs and downstairs, and it's
so that's what I wanted to mention is I need you to send me pictures, because we'll put this on the blog post on the website, because you really have to see it. Like you said, it's not done, but consider the fact that you built in 6 weeks and like sourced most of the material and only spent $3,000. Like, I would totally live there if I didn't have 2 kids. I would live there. Which is one of the benefits, I guess, of being El Solo. So yeah, we'll leave that for there and let people. We'll do like some progression pictures and then the final product. Because it really is. It's cool, man. And I think, man, more people should do that. I wish more people would do that, because it's your path to like home ownership is relatively easy if you're willing to put in the work and have some friends to help you and be a little creative and stuff. And that's one thing I learned about you. You definitely are a very creative, outside the box thinking kind of guy in a good way, at least in my opinion. Hey, there's a kid going down the street practicing riding without any hands.
Nice.
On his bike.
Shout out to the no hand kid.
Shout out, no hand kid. You got to practice. You're going to eat shit a couple times. It's okay.
Hope he's got a helmet on.
I didn't notice. He was so flashy with his no hands. I think he'll go by again. I think he's going back and forth. So yeah. Give a shout out to what y'all got going on with the makerspace, because you're like launching that like today or something, right?
Yeah. So we closed on the building less than a week ago. So we're going full speed as much as possible. But basically, for folks who don't know what a makerspace is. Makerspaces are essentially a community-operated workspace where people can meet, socialize, collaborate, create, and just kind of build off of one another and have access to resources that it doesn't make sense for everyone to buy on their own. If you think about it, the majority of woodworking tools, any kind of tool basically sits idle for the majority of its existence. So we're essentially like a community-based tool library. I have a full woodworking shop, community garden, 3D printers, CNC machine, laser cutter, vinyl cutter, recording studio for music, TV studio, really just anything that we can do to help encourage people to be creative and empower and enable people to hopefully support themselves or offset some of the living expenses that it takes. But yeah.
Well, and enable people with ideas a faster and a more economical way between. I produce a podcast and I don't have a studio or anything. Why I don't have a studio? Because it costs money. All the recording equipment, all the stuff. It all adds up. I didn't think about all that stuff when I got into podcasting, but it does add up. And
there's probably someone not very far away from you that has all that stuff, and they only use it a couple hours a week.
I love it. It's such a great concept, and you're probably a perfect person to be, because you're like living the principles that you're teaching about, being resourceful and utilizing things that are here for your benefit. I looked at y'all's Instagram and the layout that y'all have. It's impressive. Is that the final design it's like a octagon type shape?
So our building was built in the 1950s. It originally was a restaurant called the Top of LJ Restaurant. It was run along with the motel just right next to it. 2 brothers, one owned each. And then For the last couple of decades, it was actually the DFAX building. And so they, went in and added a bunch of different like rooms and compartmentalized everything and added on another rectangular building next to it. But we've got almost 8,000 square feet on 2 acres of this large octagon of all sorts of different rules that we have, labeled and segmented into a bunch of, different like activity specific rooms.
It's cool.
Iconic looking shape.
Yeah, it really is. It is. So if people want to follow along, I mean, it's super neat. I know y'all are just kind of getting started, like you said, but worth following along, I think, especially if you're in that area.
Yeah. I mean, we'll be open right around the time that this episode airs. So check us out. We're right off of River Street, really, really accessible to like the downtown area here in LJ. Come in. I won't be around because I'll actually be in Washington State working my summer job. But there's still a lot of really cool stuff to check out.
Where online can you find the Makerspace?
LJMakerspace.org.
Ooh, yeah, buddy. I just want to make sure we give them a plug because why not? You work there and that's really cool. So let's talk about bike packing. Yeah, I know you had a pretty epic first bikepacking trip. So
yeah,
what was your first bikepacking trip?
Sure. So my first like real bikepacking trip was about 1,500 miles, the Canadian section of the Great Divide Mountain Bike Route, down into Montana, took the Missoula connector, and then rode down into Darby and connected across the Magruder corridor in Idaho to connect it over to the Wild West route from bikepacking routes. And so rode up there into Idaho. And, I had great plans to continue a little bit farther than that. But as many of us have learned, one bad wreck can really end a trip. So, I ended up dislocating my shoulder and in some wilderness in Idaho, limping myself out of there, hitchhiking into town, and getting picked up by a friend of mine who took me over to Washington, where I got to help run a hostel for the rest of the summer. It had a great ending.
How far did you have to trek out once you got injured?
So I was really lucky. I only had like 5 miles to walk my bike.
Okay.
My shoulder wasn't in a ton of pain. It was a pretty minor dislocation as all things go. And I had just finished that section across the Magruder corridor. For anyone familiar with it, it's about 120 miles that goes across the Frank Church River of No Return Wilderness, which is the largest contiguous wilderness area in the lower 48. That means there is absolutely nothing out there. And at the top of the pass, there were still down trees and snowpack from the season before. And that was first week of July, still snowpack up there. And didn't see anyone the whole time I was there. So that was a couple days before I actually wrecked. So had something happened while I was there, I would have been in some pretty dire straits. But luckily, I was only 5 miles away from a road where I was able to hitchhike into town and grab a motel for the night and hit a clinic in the morning.
So to fill in the blanks for people listening, I mean, you didn't come from off the couch to do a 1,500 mile ride. You were a pretty accomplished through hiker. And I'm curious, being a through hiker, and I know you love through hiking still to this day. What was that first experience like bike packing, compared to hiking? And especially since you wrecked at the end, where you're like, man, fuck this shit. You're not going to, wreck on going 3 miles an hour, 2 miles an hour with your feet. So how was that first experience?
Empowering. Yeah. The point of the bike trip, of course, was to cover more ground in less time. I had hiked the Appalachian Trail. I had hiked the Pacific Crest Trail, which goes down the Cascades and the Sierras from Canada to Mexico, the West Coast. I'd hiked the Pacific Northwest Trail from the Pacific Ocean and the Olympic Peninsula of Washington all the way across to Glacier Park in Montana. But I had not spent a lot of time actually down the crest of the Rockies. And I wanted to explore that area, but I didn't have the time or the money to hike the Continental Divide Trail, which is 3,000 miles and it's going to take 5 or 6 months. Yeah. So I was like, I know what I'll do. I'll ride my bike. There's a route that does that too. And it seemed like the more frugal opportunity. So, yeah.
Did you already have a bike at that time?
No, I bought the bike specifically for that trip.
And what bike was it? Is this the one that got stolen?
Yeah. So that was It's a 2012 Salsa Fargo 2, the same one you have, cream
Rest in
scheme.
peace. Oh man.
Yeah.
Pour some out for your dead homie.
Yeah. But she was a dream. I miss her dearly. I've got a new Fargo built up custom and got a couple upgrades along with that. So all's well that ends well with a little sacrifice.
Did you happen to see on Instagram I don't know if I posted it yet. I meant to. The guy that did this contraption where whenever a bike thief takes his bike, the seat will go down, but a piece of rebar stays in place and goes up into your rectum.
I have not seen that.
Yeah. So this guy, he lives in some foreign country, and he was like, I got sick of people stealing my bike. So he devised this thing to go like this. And he's got a picture of like people like getting ass raped by this little invention of his. So my message is death to bike thieves, or at least a little bit of ass penetration.
Yeah, it's a tough scenario.
It is. It's not a happy topic. Moving on.
No, there's no winners.
No, there really isn't. But so did you like bike packing? I guess so. You kept with it?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if I'll ever attempt a route quite that long again. I mean, I plan to go for, closer to 3,000 miles. I actually had plans to go on to the Plateau Passage and connect down in through Moab and stuff later in the season that year. So, a little ambitious, but you never know until you find out. But yeah, loved bikepacking. It's definitely requires a different skill set. I really appreciated the opportunity to kind of reset and experience a little bit more like beginner's mind and, be doing something, have to be resourceful still and learn how to maintain my bike on the go, how to just deal with anything that the route throws at you. I definitely underestimated the size and the quantity of the climbs. But yeah, still had a great time. I did miss to some degree being able to go into like more wilderness areas, more remote areas that you're not just on this road. A lot of the backpacking routes that I'll do go cross country, don't follow a trail necessarily, and really give you that experience of being a part of your environment, like entering the landscape in a way that roads and trails just can't provide. And the trade-off of that is that you can go 2, 3, 4 times as far in a day, depending on terrain. So
it's all about accessing different things and unlocking different opportunities in different ways, different landscapes. I mean, which really segues nicely into bike rafting, right? So
it does.
Oh man, look at that. It's like I planned it. But I mean, it's all about that. That's the cool thing about bike rafting is it unlocks another way to traverse a landscape, to experience the world we live in or get away.
Access inaccessible.
Access and accessible, beautifully put. Yeah. And specifically to what you were talking about, really becoming immersed in your environment and getting away from people. This river was actually decently populated, but not annoyingly so, but there was definitely people on it, referring to the Buffalo National River that we did our trip on. But I thought first, why don't you tell us about when and what your first bike rafting trip was and how it went?
Okay. Yeah, my first bike rafting trip would have been January 2000, and I guess that was 2020. Yeah, it was the start to 2020.
Oh yeah, because
before the end of the world. Yeah. So every New Year's, my aunt and uncle go on a trip to Cumberland Island National Seashore, which is the southernmost barrier island off the coast of Georgia. Some of you may be familiar with it. It's about 17 miles long. The northern half of the island is a designated wilderness area. Yeah, it's run by the National Park Service. You have to take a ferry to get across. There's backcountry camping available, front country camping available. And, throughout the course of the history of the island, at one point it was owned by the Carnegie family of robber baron infamy. And there are ruins of mansions and still intact mansions on the island, complete with a herd of about 120 feral horses and just all sorts of beautiful, beautiful things. I mean, this wonderful maritime forest and, the live oaks, Spanish moss, all that great stuff. So, I grew up going here every 4 or 5 years or so. And yeah, that year I brought my bike and had just purchased a pack raft and was pretty determined to explore parts of the island that I'd never seen before. And so I devised a quick little route that started at the southern tip of the island. And basically I rode my bike from camp 3 or 4 or 5 miles down to the southern end and put my bike on my pack raft right there in the Atlantic Ocean, in the sound, kind of between the island and the mainland. And I timed it perfectly so that I was able to ride the tide up this river inlet into a dock right there by some of the mansion ruins. It went pretty smoothly, all things considered. It was really my first time strapping my bike onto it. The wake and the waves were a little bit unsettling. And, there were porpoises swimming alongside of me at one time or another, which you don't think of as like an unnerving interaction, but it was definitely a little unsettling knowing that you're just kind of out in open water, really, really vulnerable. And that there's these like large, powerful, animals out there able to do whatever they want to. And, it was just a couple hours long, but was really, really opened my mind into like, wow, I never, like, very few people ever see this part of this island or like this variety of it, in one experience. And it was just so exciting that I wanted to start making routes anywhere I could.
Awesome, dude. Well, so why did you want to go on a bike rafting trip? Whenever I asked you to be on the podcast, you were like bike rafting trip immediately. Were you already like just gearing up for one anyway? You're like, might as well make a podcast out of it.
So I had always had in mind, like, if I'm ever on an episode of Bikes to Death, it's going to be a bike rafting episode.
Oh, wow.
And so you reached out to me and I was like, all right, no hesitation. This is what it's going to be.
So you'd already thought about it. Wow, that's cool.
Yeah. You got to manifest your ideal reality, make it happen.
That is interesting. For anyone like I think I follow you on Instagram. We follow each other and I see a lot of bike photos, and so I like bike photos, but I think your tiny house like stood out to me. And I was like, dude, this guy's building a tiny house. Like that's fucking, that's something that really stood out to me. Yeah. And so I contacted you totally randomly, not knowing you at all. So yeah, that's kind of cool. Reality manifested.
Yeah.
Good job.
It's pretty good, I gotta admit.
Yeah. There's something to it, pointing your mind and effort and energy in a direction, So, okay, let me punt it this way. When we did our trip on the Buffalo National River, I've never heard the words, what did they say? Everybody we passed on the river was like, never seen a bike on a kayak before, or I ain't never seen that before, or are you going to ride them bikes? Or, every smattering of comment that you can imagine.
Yeah. As you put it, we were the talk of the town on the river. Every single person had something to say about us. We were a spectacle.
Everybody wanted to know, where'd you come from? Where are you going? How'd you get here? So I just, again, I cued in on really how new bike rafting is, period. Pack rafts are relatively new, and now this idea of putting on your bike and then your bike on your boat. So let's just basically, what is pack rafting, Ryan? What is it?
All right. Well, since I invented pack rafts back in 2000, no,
back in 2012.
No, pack rafts have been around for decades and decades. They've certainly gained a lot more traction recently.
That's true. Because I was talking to Rebecca Rush on the last episode, and they were using pack rafts back in like the late 1990s, back in the Eco Challenge days. So that's true. They've been around for a while. Thank you for the clarification.
I've read in like forums and stuff about people doing it like back in the mid 80s. Yeah, doing all sorts of just groundbreaking stuff. Water breaking stuff. So,
but I think you said it right. It's making a resurgence into it's coming into hiking and biking culture now. And like we said, it's opening opportunities that weren't there.
Yeah, I think that the outdoor recreation community is kind of ready for the adoption of something that involves this perfect blend of gear and experience and familiarity. And, we now have companies and brands that are making it more accessible than ever. I don't know when Alpaca Packrafts was founded. I don't know when Kokopelli Packrafts was founded. And there are, of course, other companies out there doing the same stuff. Connor has that DIY kit. He's making his own. And, people have been doing that forever. But, these companies are hitting critical mass, growing, and able to scale and pump these things out. And there's just, thousands more of them now than there ever was 5, 10, 15 years ago. So, yeah, to kind of get into like what pack rafting is, the idea is to make the most capable and lightweight and small packable flotation watercraft as possible. And, to be able to put it in a backpack and hike with it and be able to ford rivers that would otherwise be unfordable, or, to get to just really remote areas. People have always used them for hunting, for packing out, like a deer or an elk or something. And likewise, a lot of people will use them in alpine lakes for fishing and accessing a lot of, spots that don't get a lot of pressure from other fishermen. Yeah. Those who have a fair amount of experience with bikepacking understand the importance of going lightweight. And, that carries a lot of truths into all sorts of recreation opportunities. And paddling is certainly one of them. I don't know how feasible it would be to carry a kayak on a bicycle, but a pack raft, it's a game changer for sure.
Yeah, it's way more doable than I had even imagined, and we'll get into that here in a little bit. But it didn't make sense in my brain, but I'm definitely a believer now. Yeah, and just simply put, bike rafting is carrying your raft on your back or on your bike, and then carrying your bike and all of your gear on your raft and going down river. And then, it's so much fun because you can go bike raft bike, you can go bike raft raft, you can, do whatever you want to.
Yeah, you're like a transformer. It's wonderful.
More than meets the eye.
Yeah, and an important note is that the pack rafts are specifically designed to carry a load on the front. So if you inflate your pack raft and don't put anything on it or in it and just sit there and try and paddle, you're going to turn left and right and left and right. And because all your weight is in the back and you just have a single fulcrum there. But by putting your load or your gear on the front, it balances it out and makes it, incredibly manageable, really, really just steerable and usable. You were saying time and time again, like how much better this was than kayaking.
Yeah.
You didn't even have a bike on your kayak.
I way prefer the pack rafting with a loaded down, raft with a bike on it. It handles better and is way more secure than I ever felt in a kayak,
Yeah.
So yeah.
You were saying you and Connor had been on some kayak trips recently.
Yeah, we actually got into some river trips around the same time you did with COVID. It was such a great way to, this is one of the benefits I want to talk about, river trips and pack rafting is, especially in Texas, you get to do more primitive or remote camping away from people, whereas, we don't have much public land. And so the public land we do have is overrun. But yeah, you do a river trip and you can really just pick a campsite. You're not going to see anyone. It's completely isolated. And so, yeah, we got into river trips there during COVID, and it was just a lifesaver, to be able to get away on some short river trips. So relaxing too. You just sit there and, kind of sit back and let the stream river take you if you want, and paddle if you want, different speed.
The first overnight trip that I did, like during COVID, was a bikerafting trip of a route that I'd been planning for months out of Asheville that went through Pisgah National Forest, through Bent Creek, and then down into the Mills River area, and then popped out onto the French Broad River and used an overnight camping spot on the French Broad River paddle trail. It's paddle in only accessible. And then I ended up paddling back to the put in right outside of Bent Creek. And yeah, so that route is, I gave that one over to Greg Hardy at Rockgeist. Shout out, Greg.
Better post it up, Greg.
Yeah. So I got a sweet bike frame out of that, frame bag rather, as per his offer on your second episode with him.
Yeah, man.
So took him up on that.
Yeah, that's a good reminder for people out there that Greg Hardy over there at Rockgeist, he has a nice collection. We talk about bikepacking.com, and obviously they have a huge resource. But if you're in that Western North Carolina, that's really, is
Yeah,
that kind of his bread and butter,
absolutely.
around Asheville and Brevard and all that. And so he's got some great bike packing routes available on his website. And then also, you've submitted one to him that I think he's working on getting up there so people can check out the trip that you did, actually.
Yeah, no pressure, Greg.
Oh, no. I'm sure, dude, he's busy. He just bought Porcelain Rocket and they're moving into a new space and everything. So I think it's all it's a good problem to have. It's growing and not enough time.
So I've got to say, Rockgeist was how I found out about the Bikes of Death podcast. Episode 1, I was following you since then. And Rockgeist was absolutely formative to my experience with bikepacking. I had the idea of doing this big trip. I was living in Asheville. I knew there was a bag manufacturer in Asheville. So I went over there, met them, and Greg Hardy, Greg Klemmer, Eric Weber, they just absolutely took me under their wings and started taking me out for rides and showing me around and definitely showed me the ropes. And, those are just such awesome people and are really, really important cornerstone for the community in Western North Carolina, the Southeast, and the country as a whole. So huge props to them.
Good shout out for Rockgeist and the guys over there, guys and girls. Couldn't agree more. I was so fortunate to just happenstance. I'd been using their product before we ever did the episode, and I was familiar with Rockgeist and really liked him from a distance. But it's whenever you really get to meet Greg and get to know him and understand his company and his guiding principles. And I mean, it's a really solid group of people, and it's a purposeful business. They're really doing things very purposefully, keeping the community first, and it always seems like everything they do is filtered through the lens of community and customer first, and they're nailing it as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah. I mean, Amy, who works there, she organizes, the mountain haulers, social rides, and she does a coffee outside, Wednesday morning, I think, if that's still the same weekday morning. But yeah, she was a huge part of my experience with, meeting other cyclists and, mountain bikers and stuff in the Asheville area. And she works with them now. And it's just, the people there are just absolutely top notch.
Let's segue back to pack rafting, and let's I wanted to share where people can get them and give some different options, and I'll use our trip as an example. You were helpful. There's Cocapelli, like you mentioned. There's alpaca rafts, like you mentioned. You also mentioned DIY packraft.com. Connor, who went with us, he got one of their kits that you build. They send you all the pieces and how to build it. And he's an engineer and he's the perfect guy to tackle it. But his iron broke and he wasn't able to finish it in time for the trip. And I can report that yesterday he had finished it and took it for its first test drive.
No way.
Or test float. And it worked. Yeah. He said, it had a couple small leaks or something, really slow. So he needs to get it going a little bit. But I think just for people to listen, I think that what I'll do is get a full report from Connor on that experience. So anyone who's wanting to do a DIY approach, that was kind of the cool thing is he was doing DIY. You had your own that you already bought. And then what I did is I reached out to backcountrypackrafts.com. You can find them at backcountrypackrafts.com. And I rented a couple for Sarah and I. And that to me was a great option because, these pack rafts are a little pricey. I mean, you're going to spend $800 plus on them. They're an investment. And there's also a little bit, it seems like there's some lead times on some of them, so they can be hard to get on specific pack rafts.
Very high demand
Very
last
high
year,
demand.
Especially.
Which also is why we should do a podcast, because there's so many people. I'm like, dang, that's another thing I learned is how in demand these things are. Yeah, so the Backcountry Pack Rafts, I got to give them a shout out because they donated the boats. I was curious to know what that process would be like, and I wanted to go pack rafting, and I didn't want to spend $1,000 to find out. I can say now that I've done it, Sarah and I are both selling things. She sold one kayak, and we've been selling stuff to like buy a pack raft.
Yeah, Sarah told me like a couple days after we got back from the trip that she was selling her kayaks. I'm like going for it.
We're all in. When I told Connor about this podcast and I said pack rafting or bike rafting, his eyes lit up like Christmas. Oh, and I wanted to mention, sorry, before we move on, there's a Facebook group that actually you sent me that's called like Pack Raft Buy and Sell or Sell and Buy. That's
Packraft or something.
Use pack rafts, yeah. Seems like a great resource. I didn't get one off there, but they're in hot demand, so you gotta be quick.
A lot of the users there are in Europe, so if you're a listener in Europe, then the odds are probably in your favor. But it's a great place to look at what the secondhand market is like and hopefully score a good deal. Yeah, a lot of people buy one and then immediately realize they want to upgrade. I'm definitely in that camp. I would love to upgrade to a new packraft pretty soon. You know, one with maybe a removable spray skirt and a T-zip for the storage compartment inside the hull. You got to stay on top of it, but the opportunities are out there.
Real quick, one of the things I realize is it's so new that I don't think everyone has decided on what to call it. But what do you call it?
So I tend to refer to it just as bike rafting on the whole, which is vague in that it doesn't specify whether or not you're doing an overnight trip. A lot of people will do just day trips for bike rafting, and that simplifies things a great deal. Bikepack rafting is certainly more specific and specifies that you're doing 1 to infinity days with your setup. But I like just the brevity of bike rafting because I think it doesn't blur the line between bike packing and pack rafting. It's very clear that there's a bike, there's a raft, and you got to figure it out from there. That's my preference.
I have to agree. At first, I was liking bike pack rafting, and then I decided that everything is bike pack something, and so let's just simplify it and call it bike rafting. And as I was looking at other blogs or even websites that sold them, oftentimes they were referring to it as bike rafting. And so I think I can get on board with that one too. Let's talk about some of the different types. Like if someone was going to buy a pack raft or even rent one, what should they be looking for? You just touched on a few and maybe using yours, like what yours just doesn't have and what you would like to have is a good way to answer that question. But one thing that I learned about was self-bailing versus not self-bailing, which I think is important to mention because I ended up with a non-self-bailing one, which essentially means that the bottom of the boat is completely sealed up. Water can get in and you have to dump it out with a water bottle or something, or get out and dump it over. But what Sarah got was a self-bailing, which means that it has holes at the bottom, which means that the water is going to be inside all the time, but it always stays at the same level essentially, and you never have to bail it out. So when we were doing it, it was like in the 40s and raining, and she was sitting in a puddle of water like the whole day, cold water. Yeah. So what other things, I mean, that's going to come down to like personal preference and what kind of, I would just do more research unless you have some more comments on that. But what other types of, you mentioned like T-zips. That's an important one.
I would say like the three like most primary features in a pack raft are going to be, is it self-bailing or not? Which I would say most of the ones used in Bikerafting are not self-bailing. Self-bailing is generally a like whitewater specific feature. And if you are doing whitewater with your bike, bless you, you know what you're doing more than I can tell you. But that being said, if you get a secondhand raft or if you're borrowing one, that may be the raft that you have. And it's perfectly functional and it's not going to detract from your experience too much, especially if the weather's nice. And then, other important features are whether or not it has a spray deck or spray skirt. Again, more useful in a whitewater setting. I wouldn't mind being able to do some more class 3 type stuff with my pack raft. And then, of course, the T-zip, the storage compartment inside the hull or like the inflatable part of the raft. So someone somewhere in the world has invented an airtight zipper, and you can store dry bags and non-dry bags inside of your pack raft, so that you don't have to have your entire bike and load and everything on top, making you a little bit less stable and a little bit just more top heavy in general. So for a beginner, if you can pay the extra $150 for that T-zip, absolutely go for it. Spray deck or spray skirt, not necessarily necessary. And
we would have liked to have had one because it was cold and rainy and we were wet the whole time. And so we would have all paid extra to have a spray deck and spray skirt, but we didn't. But yeah, or if you're in, I guess, some crazier rapids, yeah, those would be good things to consider. And the T-zip thing blew me away, that you could like shove your shit inside your raft. But we all had T-zips and you didn't. And yours, and it's worth mentioning that, I mean, I don't know, you tell me, but it seemed like you didn't ever tip over or nothing, I mean, you handled just fine. So it can be done, but
it was all right. So all three of you had the pack raft that I want.
Okay.
To put it frankly, you all had an alpaca caribou, which is, in my opinion, the standard for pack rafting. I own a Kokopelli Rogue, which is fantastic entry level. I mean, I got it on the Cyber Monday sale in 2019. It was great price, minimal features. It got me on the water, and I've used the heck out of it, and I loved every single minute, except for a few of the minutes that we shared together in that raft. For a lot of people, it'll be a get what you can type scenario, especially for people who are starting out in the sport. Yeah, I would love to have the T-zip. I would love to also have a removable spray skirt, because just like Sarah, I was sitting in water for the majority of the trip. I had my 40-ounce clean canteen that I was using to bail out water constantly. Every single rapid afterwards, you guys would look back and see me sitting there dumping like 10 or 12 bottlefuls of water. And I was just soaked and freezing, and the wind's blowing down the corridor of the river, and it's cloudy, and you're getting fresh cold water inside all the time. Certainly a warm weather activity if possible.
Yeah, to put it mildly. All right. Yeah, those are all good tips. The only other thing I would add to it that I noticed that's a nice feature is, I mean, you're going to have areas to strap your bike and gear on the front of the pack. I noticed that Connor's had some loops closer back to where the paddler would be, and I like that because he could volet strap things that he wanted access to, like food or whatever he had there. Mine didn't have that, so that's the only other thing that I would note is like look for attachment points where you might want them. Let's talk about route planning a little bit, because whenever you're talking about bike rafting, it brings in some different things. Water, for example. So checking water levels is going to be crucial to being able to plan a route. And, I can say for the route that we did, based on water levels, we had 2 routes picked out, one up river and one down. And you have to go to the USGS website, I believe, and you can get water levels there at various points along a river. And I guess you could go on and Google and figure out how to do that. But, it adds a different element, because originally we were looking at New Mexico. It's like, well, there's no water. Where actually you think that there was water, but maybe there wasn't.
It's debatable for that specific section. There are like rafting and guiding companies that go there.
Yeah.
And do that section. And the short stretch of the Rio Grande we were going to do, just north of Las Cruces, we were looking at doing something actually off of the Monumental Loop. It's just below 2 different dams. So they have the option to, dam release water and make the Rio Grandes below there very navigable. And somehow these, outfitters coordinate with those dam releases to flow that. And yeah, it can be done.
I want, this is going to be fun. Matt Mason, who is one of the creators of the Monumental Loop, I don't know if you saw this on Instagram or not, but I guess I didn't realize it, but the last 3 episodes, I've given him a shout out.
Yeah,
And
he's getting some heavy rotation.
yeah, and I didn't mean to, but I guess he's been on my mind. I've been thinking
He's a
about
great
Matt a
guy.
lot. Yeah, he is a great guy. Why wouldn't I think about him? But it's funny because I was like, well, how long are we going to keep this streak going? And of course, we had to keep him going. But this time, I'm going to say that we got some bad beta from Matt Mason. That's right, Matt. I'm calling you out. Just kidding. Matt's a through hiker too, slash desert rat, and so I don't know if he knows as much about the water. I don't know. I know for a fact he told me he doesn't know much about it. Honestly, like I really love Northwest Arkansas, and I've always wanted to float the Buffalo National River. For people who don't know, it was the first ever dedicated national river, and it's quite beautiful. Kind of getting ahead of myself, and I want to make sure I just put this out there. So we talked about water levels. Just to, ride with GPS, which is what I use to create all my routes. On rivers, you use the draw line feature, and you can, do it that way. And for planning, I think, it's important to just keep in mind that you'll probably travel about 3 to 4 miles per hour. And I actually looked at our speed, and we went 4.2 miles an hour on average. So we were pretty fast.
I'm surprised it was that high. Yeah.
Because the current must have been pretty decent because we weren't paddling too hard.
Yeah.
Any other tips that you can think of for just, water levels? Keep in mind how far you can travel in a certain amount of time. What else? Anything else?
I mean, the ideal scenario is finding a section of a river that is popular with paddlers. If you have paddling experience and good paddling areas that has, class 2, class 1 / flat water that also has decent gravel and or single track nearby, then you're golden. That's really like the sweet spot, is being able to find that. And I looked out at that with, having Pisgah National Forest right next to the French Broad River. Mm-hmm. French Broad is in that section, pretty far upstream, pretty slow, pretty flat. And yeah, if you can find that, then it's worth driving an extra hour or two to get a route that's going to meet those criteria. But other than that, you want to ride upstream and float downstream and hopefully cross your own path at some point.
Yeah, those are worth mentioning. Yeah, you want your paths to cross.
If you can get a section of paddling that has campsites with river access, then even better, because you can hit those spots that only paddlers can get to. And yeah, so it's a lot of fun to kind of look at your maps with a different perspective, follow the blue lines, and the paddling has to come first, really. I think bikes are a little bit more flexible. The road conditions and all that aren't quite as important as the water levels. So
yeah, exactly.
It's going to be seasonal in a lot of areas, and you just have to be okay with that and go with the flow.
Yeah, it comes with the territory. Let's segue into talking about our trip that we did. Obviously, we teased it a bunch, but I thought it would be a good way to just kind of go through, talk about our trip a little bit, and maybe just, some things that we learned along the way, because you're always learning. And I learned a ton. The entire trip was a learning experience for me.
I learned a lot.
Yeah, you can't. Well, I don't want to say you can't, but it just seems like that's what you do. It's always a learning process. I'm going to pull up our route so we can see it while we're talking. But we essentially, it was a time issue mostly on my end, but we put together a 3-day bike rafting trip that covered it was originally 25-mile bike ride with one substantial climb and one substantial downhill, which brought us right down to the Buffalo National River at the end of the day. So in the morning, we would be able to put in right there from camp. And that next day we floated, what did we float? 10.6 miles. And day 3 was going to be a raft only, and it turned into a raft, and then we hopped back on our bikes, which was kind of cool. It showed me another level of, hey, that's an opportunity I didn't consider, where it opened up. Hey, because, well, we'll just say real quick, like, we were kind of running low on time. XYZ plan.
It was raining more.
It was raining more.
We were thunder.
Our fingers and toes were frozen.
Bailout options are a really important consideration that I should add. Being stuck in a section of river where you cannot get out is really not a great scenario to be in. So it does take some careful planning to, to be aware of, okay, there's a road that goes reasonably close to the water here. And that was absolutely not the first time that I've had to bail out of some water in order to get, to a safer or more comfortable situation.
Yeah. We'll touch on that again. Let's start on day one. And like I said, it was the bike portion. And let's start with how we packed our bikes. So why don't you go first? You had a little bit more experience than I did, but you were actually packing up for the first time on a new bike and everything. So how'd you pack yours?
Yeah. So about a year ago, I, having used my pack raft on my bike a couple times, the obvious issue is, okay, putting all your camping gear on a bike is one thing. Adding a 5-pound pack raft, a 6-foot paddle, and a personal flotation device creates its own situation. So the classic or default or simplest method is to have a backpack, throw the pack raft in it. The pack raft is designed to be attached to a backpack in most uses, and the paddles generally break down into 4 sections instead of just 2. PFD is usually pretty light and can be added on top of something without too much issue. But yeah, so about a year ago, I bought a wonderful little T-rack to go over my rear wheel, specifically to put my pack raft on top of, and it's got some attachment points where I can add some many things cages and put some dry bags on the sides of that to really just make it simpler and be able to carry a lot more than just my regular seat pack would allow. And so I brought my T-rack along. It worked on my last Fargo. I was going to pop it on top of this Fargo, no problem. I show up around noon, start packing my bike together before you guys get there, and realized, wow, this rack doesn't fit this bike because this bike has a larger tire clearance and I have a larger tire than I did on my last Fargo. And oh no, what am I going to do? So I ended up actually being the only one of us 4 who used a backpack. So I've actually never put my pack raft in a backpack before, but in a pinch, it was definitely the simplest, easiest option. And given that it was, reasonably cool and cold at some times, the backpack really didn't bother me too much. But anyone who's used a backpack on a bike knows that in warmer weather, it's not ideal. So ideally, you'll be able to strap everything on either to your handlebars or either with a T-rack or a really large seat pack or something like that.
Yeah, so what I did was I actually used my Rockgeist bar jam, which is their front harness system, and that's what I used for everything. I asked Greg, I'm like, hey, do you think this will work for a pack raft? He's like, I think so. And as I can report back,
that's what I've always used.
Yeah, dude. I mean, it worked. It worked. Like, I'm so impressed by that thing. It really does work so well. But I was able to put my, the pack raft, they roll up pretty small. They really do. It's basically just like a front roll. And then your paddles break up into 4 sections. So I put the 2 like round, the parts you would hold with your hand. I don't know what you call it, the shaft. Wrap that in the front roll with the pack raft. And then for my setup, what I had to do for the first time is I got anything cages for the fork mounts and was able to shift, what would be my sleep system that would typically go there into the forks, which left, I should mention that whenever, we were all kind of packing these for the first time in the parking lot.
That was
at
scene.
12 o'clock. Yeah, it was fun, man. Yeah, there'll be some pictures on the website.
In the rain.
Yeah, it's it's starting to rain, and oh my gosh, it was cold and rainy, and it's kind of like
we considered putting off the start until the next day.
Yeah, we could have turned it into a 2-day, a 1-day ride and a 1-day raft. What do you think? Are you glad we did the 3-day, or do you think you would have preferred to do the 2-day? Now looking back on it,
I'm really glad we did the 3-day. On the 3rd day, I was maybe not as convinced. By the end of it, I was pretty beat, pretty worn out, pretty spent. But type 2 fun. It was a blast, and I'm really glad that we got to spend as much time together as possible.
Thanks, dude. It was a lot of fun. I'm glad. It's definitely a type 2 fun situation where, I mean, in it, I knew I was having fun. But anytime you're cold and wet, like all day long, it's harder to keep spirits up. But I'll say we all did a good job. I mean, made lemons out of lemonade, or lemonade out of lemons.
Having backpacked about 7,000 miles in the last 5 years and having bike packed just over 2,000 miles in the last 7 years, that was probably the least prepared I've ever been on a trip. I didn't bring an insulation layer. I genuinely thought it was going to be just sunny and warm on Saturday and Sunday. So I had like my women's running shorts and like my little button up short sleeve shirt, my sunglasses and my cap. And I thought I was just going to be set for all the paddling. Thought the rain was going to be done after Friday. I mean, I froze my ass off, frankly. I was not a happy camper. But we had a fire both nights. And I think that's a huge credit to us, in rainy circumstances.
Yeah, we'll talk about that because the fires were definitely lifesavers. I always get sidetracked. So I wanted to finish real quick because I'm really proud of where I put the fat, what do they call the paddle part, the part that goes in the water?
The paddle part of the paddle.
The paddle part of the paddle. You're going to have to go on Instagram to see on the website for this episode.
It was a work of art.
It was a work of art, and all credit to Volley straps. But I essentially Volley strapped them to the pack that was on my fork there. I just freaking cinched 2 Volley straps around it, and it went on the whole time. I thought for sure it was going to fly off and kill me or somebody else, but it worked the whole time. That was my biggest challenge to overcome for packing by far. The second of which was where to put that PFD. I thought about wearing it. I thought about leaving it in the van, which I don't recommend doing, and I did take it. And ultimately, it just kind of Volley strapped it on around the back of the seat pack or seat bag, saddle bag. And it worked fine. I don't think anybody's shit fell off or anything. I mean,
day one, every one of us had to make at least 1 or 2 adjustments.
Adjustments? I didn't see anything falling off. Yeah, maybe a little bit.
After the first 10 miles, we were dialed.
Okay, yeah. What did you think about Arkansas, man? That was your first time there. What was your impressions of Arkansas?
Yeah, so I've been waiting for my first experience in Arkansas after hearing about the High Country Loop and all the awesome single track going around in that area. And while our route was strictly gravel and asphalt, I was pretty blown away by the Ozarks, and just the East Coast just has that subtle beauty. You've got to have an appreciation for the biology and just it's just not quite as in your face as the West Coast. And man, Arkansas was clean. Those cliffs and the canyons going down the Buffalo River were 100 or 200 feet tall at times, and it was just so easy to appreciate. The one thing that really stood out about Arkansas was the lack of litter. It was just such a clean weekend. I think we found 1 piece of litter the entire route. Connor picked up and started using as a bailer, and it was just a water bottle floating in the river, and that was it.
Yeah.
Just pristine, clean, beautiful smelling. Just Arkansas was so fresh. Highly recommended to anyone with the opportunity. Worth a 10.5-hour drive.
Boom. That's high praise. Yeah, I couldn't. We both had about a 10.5-hour drive, and everybody knows I'm a big fan of Arkansas. And part of, you're getting out into really rural areas where there aren't that many people, and with that means less light pollution, less trash, less people, less traffic, all that stuff, all the things that we like. Day one, after we got the packs on the bikes, from there it was just about pedaling and being cold and wet. Essentially, there was I want to mention, I forgot to mention earlier that I'm going to put this route out as well, because the route it was a great route. There's not a lot of bike rafting routes out there. So if people want to go and do the route that we did, this is a very doable, very beautiful, no trash, no people, just a great route. So
yeah, it says here it was 21 miles day one, and that was all the pedaling that we really did, with the exception of the bail, but that's not part of the route.
It could be, though. It's a great, it should be on there as a bailout, I think. Why not? We certainly used it. But yeah, so the route is basically typified by a huge climb. Let's see, how far is this climb? Should we go all the way? We'll go all the way up. 5.7 miles, climbing 1,500 feet. What did you think about the climbing?
It was a beautiful hike. Yeah, there was one stretch of that where I swear the grade was like 40 or 50%. I mean, it got pretty steep at one point, but it was all dirt and gravel roads. We didn't have hardly any cars on there at all. And I mean, the views were just beautiful, pastoral, rural, some of the coolest cows and yaks and goats and just beautiful stuff. Yeah, those classic rolling hills in the Ozarks. It was grade A. I mean, you imagine like a beautiful, green pasture of flowers and everything. And like, that's where we were the whole time.
It was springtime and we were getting the showers instead of the sunshine, but you could tell it was a really beautiful. What stood out to me on that day one was the day went so well, but man, it got down, later on in the day. We started late and the temperature started dropping, and we had this descent that's about 3.5 miles down to camp, max grade 0.8%. And I looked at it, and our top speed, or my top speed, was 39 miles an hour.
That's all?
Well, I had my brakes on because it was so cold and it was raining so hard. You posted the video or the picture of me at the end. I mean, I was just obliterated because the rain was like stinging your face. I couldn't see, and you couldn't feel your hands because they were so cold and wet. I was worried I was going to eat shit. 39 was all. How fast did you go?
I don't know, but it was a ripping descent for sure. So
yeah,
for reference, the descent was all paved for everyone. So I'll say like not a single car passed me on the descent.
No.
I let you guys go ahead because I had to like either make an adjustment or go to the bathroom or something, but I wanted to like have that road to myself. It was the first big descent on my new bike that I've done in months and months and months. So I was looking forward to it. I was very aware of the potential for me to wipe out wet conditions and everything, but I took it pretty hard, and the rain was, like you said, stinging in the eyes. You got to do like the tightest squint possible, just barely be able to see. But it was a blast. It was worth the climb for sure.
It was fun. It hurt a little bit, but what's fun without a little bit of pain too?
And we got to give a shout out to the gas station up there at the top of the climb, like right before the descent. The name of the town or the hamlet or the name of the store even escapes me right now. It was like Woodstock or something, maybe?
Crompton.
Let's go with Compton. Oh, yeah, that's right. Because we went straight out of Compton. Yeah, there was this outfitter in the gas station.
JB Trading Co. Yep.
Huge shout out to JB Trading. It was an unbelievably well-stocked outfitter. I mean, tents, sleeping pads, sleeping bags, backpacks, you name it. They had pack rafts for sale in their outfitter on our route. Was mind-blowing. We looked in the window and saw those and we're like, what?
Yeah, that's great. I picked up a Frog Tog rain suit that had its own story, but it did serve me well through the trip. It was like 3 sizes too big, but it worked. And it got a tear in the ass the first time I tried to get on my bike. So I had like wet crotch.
You were the driest of all of us.
Frog Togs with holes in them still work better than no Frog Togs. We have to talk about where we slept. So, I mean, again, just finished up, the long day in the rain, cold, and we were going to a designated campsite with firewood maybe, and we cross a bridge, and Connor says, we could sleep under the bridge. And the bridge was going over the Buffalo National River, so we would be right there. Turned out to be like the perfect...
There was a put-in right there.
There was a put-in right there. So that's where we questionably, illegally... Actually, it's not a question. We know it was illegal because the next morning, we got a visit from one of the park rangers who let us know that we were illegally camping. But he was actually like super cool with us. And, we made sure to leave no trace. And he understood. I mean, we were cold. And at first he was confused.
Yeah, he didn't understand how we had like rafts and bikes. There were, 4 bikes, 4 rafts, and 4 of us. And he couldn't quite put that together. So I will say not my proudest moment as a public lands user. It was land essentially underneath the National Park Service. And we were, frankly, at the end of that descent, we were in pretty rough shape. We were shivering pretty solidly. Frankly, we just, in a moment of weakness, didn't feel like making the 2-mile climb up to the campsite. But for anyone doing this route, please don't make the mistake that we made. And, hopefully you'll be in better weather and it won't be an issue. Anyway, please push on to that campsite, that campground that's on the route. And, yeah.
I mean, I think we all decided that was the smartest decision for us. It's not one that I would advocate for ever, but I'll also be honest that we prioritize being dry and warm and having a fire. And, yeah, I wouldn't recommend it, but do you think it was the right decision?
Ooh, that's a really tough question.
Ooh.
I think I'm actually going to say no. I don't think it was the right decision. I doubt that we would have had a fire if we went to the campground. We would have been really cold. I think we would have been all right, though. It was certainly the more comfortable. It was the safer option. It's hard to say objectively how desperate we actually were, because we didn't face the consequences of what it would have been like to go in an area that doesn't have this large dry section where we had dry firewood, that was protected underneath that overpass. So it's pretty hard to say that, but I really try not to do things like that. And yeah, I hope I don't have to again.
I don't like to do it either. I don't know. I think you make the decisions that you're comfortable with in the moment, then you just have to live with it, which we have to do. And I think what you learn is to be better prepared so that, you don't find yourself in situations like that. And I'm okay being honest with that because we all learn how to do things better. And I know that none of us were prepared to be in the rain all night and into the next day. Like the weather that we got and what we prepared for didn't match up. And so we were ill prepared. Would we have died? I don't think we would have died, but
we could have cuddled up.
Yeah, we could. Exactly. I mean, we could have got naked and cuddled up and it would have been fine, but we weren't ready for an orgy yet. But the good thing that came out of that was we invented sleeping in your pack raft.
I don't know if we invented it.
I feel like we did. God damn it.
I specifically have seen people do that. So,
all right, fine.
They didn't have bikes with them, but they were still sleeping on them.
Were you the one that thought of that?
I think I might have mentioned it as a possibility. I may have had a degree of kidding about it, but it ended up being an excellent idea. Certainly better than the 1/4-inch closed cell foam sleeping pad that I had with me.
Yeah, exactly. And
as I found out the second night.
So, I mean, to just articulate this a little bit better, there's 2 ways to do this. I slept in mine the way a raft would be in, where it's the bottom down, and then I put pads in the open part on the bottom, and it kind of just like cradled me a little bit, like a cradle,
like a hammock Sarah, almost.
Like a hammock. I'm a hammock sleeper, but like Sarah and Connor, I think I don't know.
And myself,
you did all like flipped it upside down.
Yeah, like a bed.
So, like a bed. I guess I like to be curled up and other people like to stretch out. But either way works. I think, as a point, either one seems to work. And Sarah, actually, on the second night, we had a perfect campsite and she slept so good that she was like, fuck it, I'm doing it again.
Yeah, she said she slept better than her bed at home.
Yeah, she did.
That is high praise for a pack.
And she has a nice bed. I've slept in it before. Shh, don't tell my mom.
Don't tell Sarah. No.
Oh, that would be funny. You what? Oh, man. All right. Well, let's get back to our continued journey.
Okay.
I guess we'll just say for anyone listening, I had to go pick up my daughter. Yeah. And so we're continuing our conversation. We left off kind of around on day 1. So I think it was a good place to pick up on the morning of day 2.
Yeah.
And like we said, we camped under the bridge, mixed feelings about it, and woke up the next day, had our encounter with the park ranger who definitely confirmed we were in the wrong spot. But shall we say no harm, no foul?
I would say no harm, no foul. Yeah.
No harm, no foul.
It was a close call, but we did our best to mediate the repercussions from our actions. And I will say the very first principle of leave no trace is plan and prepare. And that is where our failure point was. We hadn't quite fully planned and prepared for the conditions that we were experiencing. And I think that we had a little bit of work that we could have done, myself especially, to, just be better prepared for, what we were volunteering to do. We put ourselves in that situation, and, we have an obligation to accept.
The repercussions from our actions.
Yeah. But, never a failure, always a lesson.
100%, my friend. That's a good way to put it. And I'm glad you brought up that it's all about preparation and preparedness. And that's what I said is like, I admit to some shortcomings. I don't think it was just you. I think all of us learn from that experience. And that's when experiences aren't wasted, when you learn from them. And everybody's going to fail. Everybody's going to make mistakes. Everybody's going to come up short here or there. And that's the important thing. And the lesson that I always try to keep with me personally is that it is about how you learn from that defines that experience. If you choose not to learn from it and you repeat it, that's when I think, you have a problem, and I think it's okay to make mistakes. Like we need to be allowed to make mistakes in life and bikepacking and all that, but you're going to have to pay the consequences. Luckily for us, there weren't really any too much, but we did get an opportunity to learn a lesson, and we should take that opportunity to learn, grow, and do better next time. And I think all of us are the type of people that will, hopefully,
Yeah.
So day one, it was our first time, at least for three of us, first time ever putting our pack rafts on a bike. Day two was three of our first times ever putting bikes and all of our gear on a pack raft.
Yeah. Oh, how the turntables.
Yeah, let's give some tips on how to do it. I'll say, the number one thing that absolutely blew my mind was the T-zip handle. Like we mentioned, it's a big opening in the vessel, so you can cram as much of your gear as you can put in there. Take it off your bike, take your bags off your bike, and put it in there. It's completely waterproof as long as you don't puncture it. That blew my mind and really made a lot of sense and made it a lot easier to then put your bike on the pack raft. You just had less to deal with. That was a benefit I had because I had the T-zip, but you didn't. So you had a little bit more stuff to overcome.
A little finesse, maybe. Yeah. So basics when it comes to, converting your setup into rafting mode, just about essential to remove your front wheel. And it sure helps to remove your back wheel as well. So, even if you've got through axles, you don't have quick release, it's worth it to take the time to go ahead and remove both your wheels, just because you are getting your center of balance over the middle of your pack raft. I was stubborn on this trip and, only took my front wheel off. And that definitely affected my experience a little bit. One of the other main repercussions of that is that if you have one of your wheels on, it's of course going to be sticking out some, and that limits your range of motion with your paddle. And, by narrowing your profile down a lot, that really, really helps your navigation and just your general range of motion.
Yeah, it keeps you a little more compact if you have to go through tighter areas, just less stuff on the front to get caught on trees or whatever.
Yeah.
Which I did get caught on a tree in the first.
Yeah, just about immediately. It was like the first little ripper we went through.
Oh, that was funny. Ryan was like, what are we doing with this fool?
Yeah, that was one of my favorite moments.
Sarah got in my way, and I'm a gentleman. Instead of ramming her, I went around her and got myself into the tree. But it was pretty funny. I was like first mile into the trip, completely wrapped up in a tree. The water's like piling up around me and trying to push me, and I'm just kind of stuck. And I'm thinking to myself, actually, I was yelling. I remember I yelled out, I was like, I'm in an inflatable boat in a tree. I'm gonna.
Yeah, it was before you really had the opportunity to like test the durability of the raft and like the maneuverability of it. We had like just put in like 15 minutes ago, and here you are like completely stopped and stationary in flowing water with this, this tree overhanging the river there.
I legitimately thought that I was going to puncture the raft, and that was going to be the
trip. Going down.
Luckily, that was like the most dramatic thing that happened the whole float, at least. So I'm trying to think. Oh, I wanted to tell about your inflatable thing. I think that's worth mentioning.
Oh, absolutely. So if you buy a pack raft, it's probably going to come with an inflation bag, which is like a large, it's almost silk, but I'm sure it's some other synthetic material that if you look it up, you'll find out what it is. But It'll weigh probably 3 or 4 ounces, and it's this large bag that will screw onto your air valve of your pack raft, and you kind of shake it open and then, twist the two handles shut, and you can kind of squeeze and force that air into your raft several times and slowly inflate it. But you can also purchase these handy dandy handheld electronic, basically inflation air pumps. I know Cocopelli sells one that's branded by them. I have an off-brand one. I don't know if Alpaca has one of their own, but essentially it'll fit in the palm of your hand. It weighs 6 ounces. So really, really minimal weight cost. They usually run between 25 and 35 or $40. And they will inflate your pack raft all the way up in, 45 seconds or more. One charge, it's a USB rechargeable piece. One charge, you can probably inflate your pack raft about 25 or 30 times. So I realized pretty early on that dealing with the inflation bag is not something I wanted to mess with. Having that air pump was just absolutely awesome. We inflated all 4 of our pack raft both days with that thing, and it was just so handy having that on hand.
And almost equally as important, or more important, was the fire starting capabilities that it offered.
Yeah.
That came in clutch.
Yeah, especially with some of the wet wood that we were trying to burn.
Right,
using that thing essentially as just an air blower to provide oxygen to the fire was such a game changer. I mean, we grew that thing really, really quickly.
Yeah, man, it was pretty fun. There was a good video of Sarah. I'm drying out my bum on the fire, and you like light up your inflator and burn my ass a little bit. And Sarah got a video of it. I didn't mind too much, man. We were so cold at the end, like it was pretty brutal.
Yeah. So day 2, we weren't on our bikes at all. We did looks like 10 miles on the river, and
10 and a half miles.
Yeah, we're moving our arms and shoulders some, but for the most part, our heart rate's pretty low. And we're down there, it's raining, it's cloudy, the wind's blowing. And, I was sitting in a puddle for the majority of the day. And I was pretty shaken, pretty chilled.
So let's talk about clothes. I was wearing wool. I mean, I wore, tried to wear some rain shield stuff that, will work for a period of time, but it's not going to keep you dry forever. I had on wool base layers, basically just a wool long sleeve shirt and a wool underwear. And I mean, I wasn't like super warm, but I do think that it, wool does what wool does. It keeps you relatively warm, even though it's wet.
Yeah.
What were you wearing?
So I also had my wool leggings on, absolutely essential. And I had a synthetic hooded shirt, essentially, base layer. And that's pretty much what I wore. I had my rain pants over that and my rain jacket over that. But of course, when you're sitting in water, the rain pants aren't going to do much. I did not bring an insulation layer at all. No down jacket, no nothing. And that was absolutely my fatal mistake for the trip. So
that was rough.
Made it more difficult for me to get warm once we got to camp. We suffered well.
It was pretty rough. The takeaway there is, especially if you're going to do something like this, you're going to be wet all day. And if there's a chance of rain and it's going to be raining on you all day, it's essential to have like a warm, dry clothes that you can get into at night. I think I actually did pretty okay in that regard.
Yeah, I'd say all 3 of you did great.
Yeah, I think my only failure from a clothing aspect was I brought a rain jacket, but I own several rain pants, and in my mind I was thinking, oh, I don't need those. I don't know why.
I can relate though. Yeah.
Yeah. In hindsight though, I'm like, that was a dumb thing to do, but yeah, lesson learned.
JB Outfitter in Compton, represent. They hooked you up with the frog togs.
Yeah. Those were a fashion statement for sure, especially whenever I bent over every time and you could see all my junk.
Yeah, the first time you got on your bike, you just ripped the pants straight through.
Well, it's funny. They're like 3 sizes too big, and I still ripped the inseam out.
Yeah, it's tough finding the right rain pants that you can use on your bike still. I use cycling-specific rain pants, and they really do make a difference for the range of motion.
I have some. I was a dummy and didn't bring them, but yeah, next time. So I wanted to talk about the rapids that we had and what the water was like for perspective. Yeah, why don't you tell us? You're more a water guy than I am.
Okay, so The section of the Buffalo River we did was, just class 1 and class 2 rapids. And that's going to vary a little bit based on the water levels. Luckily, there was a fair amount of rain that week leading up to our trip. And that actually allowed us to do this section that we would not have been able to do otherwise. We had a backup route that we thought at one point we were going to have to do. So, some relatively mild class 2 rapids, nothing terribly sustained, pretty minimal risks, a couple spots where you got to do a quick tight turn to avoid either a rock or just a tree overhanging, but no strainers in this section.
What's a strainer? Tell the uninitiated.
Yeah, so a strainer is just like a down tree or some type of debris that goes all the way across the river that you have to then portage around or carry your craft out of the river to get around it. So yeah, all things considered, this was a pretty mild trip, but it was plenty fun.
Yeah, it's bike rafting friendly, I would say. I'll say this again. I've done some kayaking. I've done some white water rafting with a guide and all that. But I mean, this for me handled way better than any kayak I've ever been in. The class 1, class 2 rapids that we did, there was one section we came to, I know you'll remember it, where there was a huge group that all portaged around. This class 2 section was in a nice S. And I don't think any of us gave it a second thought. We're just like, we're going, we didn't blink.
Yeah, there was probably like 15 or 20 people there, either stopped and they decided to have lunch there, or they were just portaging around it and continuing. And these were people who had passed us earlier too. And we were like, oh, funny seeing you again. Because we kind of just assumed that everyone there was more experienced than us.
Or faster or whatever. But, I'm not a very good boatsman. I don't even know what the word is.
Paddler.
To be honest. Paddler. I'm not a very good paddler. Thank you. I have some decent experience, but not a ton. And I went in, you'll know, Ryan, that I was a little nervous. I respect the water greatly. I know the power that it has. And so I don't want to paint this picture that I'm this great paddler with all this experience and all this. I really went in with a lot of question marks about the boat's ability to handle, a 195-pound guy plus a bike plus 55, with 55 pounds of gear on a 5-pound inflatable raft going down the river with
on
rocks
a pool toy.
Yes, in your mind it doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, it doesn't quite add up until you experience it.
I want to share that with people that are also trepidated and also have concerns. I don't want you to put your guard down because, like I say, water is so it demands your respect all the time, and you should take it seriously and know what you're doing. But I also want to express that I think that this route in particular we can speak to. This is a very doable route. It was 3 of our first times doing it, and nobody flipped in. Nobody had any major crazy experiences. We had a couple exciting things where I got caught in a tree and a couple little things here and there, but really pretty smooth sailing, I would say. Weather aside and all that,
nobody swam.
So, I think that's important to put out because I'll tell you that was definitely one of my concerns. I didn't want to. I was super motivated not to get wet or capsized.
You mentioned that several times that you were not going to get wet. And again, I think you stayed the driest of all of us. So props to you.
I was committed, man. I mean, yeah, we were going to be, like you said, we're going to be in the river, cold, wet all day long. So the better I could make it, the better.
Day 3, I just said, forget the leggings, forget the rain pants. I'm just going to wear my shorts and just roll with it.
What was your goal for day 3? I mean, day 3, let's see what.
Day 3 was deceiving because that morning before we put in, the sun came out. It was so hopeful. And if anyone's been to Splash Mountain, Brer Rabbit ride at Disney, Magical Kingdom, there's the part where everything's all happy and then they're like, oh no, don't go that way. It was like that. We had, sunshine. We're finally feeling like it was okay. We put in the water, sun goes away immediately. The wind picks up, the rain starts falling, thunder starts. And we were just like, what are we getting ourselves into? And that was right after we passed our first bailout option of the day. And we had committed to doing 5 or 6 more miles. Yeah, there we were.
So we did 10.5 the first day. And I think that would leave us 15 miles on the second day, which at 4 miles an hour, and you take out for lunch, and you'll take out for stuff like you took out to dump out your raft a couple times. You
Yeah.
put out to rearrange your gear once. Sarah had to inflate her raft a few times because it had a slow leak or something.
Yeah.
So your moving average and your total average are obviously going to be different. So yeah, let's see, I'm trying to see what we did here.
Just over 6 miles.
We'll say 6 miles. That was kind of the neat thing about this experience for me that really, like I said, unlocked all the options that you have when you're bike rafting, because it was day 3. We'd been a little tired, but mostly I think it was like drained from being in the elements, cold, wet, rainy. It's tough mentally to just like stay in that space. It was going to be like an 8-hour day on the river essentially. And we still had hopes at that point of recording a podcast at the end of the day. So
Yeah.
the cool thing is, we hop on Ride with GPS, and I just recorded an episode with Ride with GPS. So I'm thinking about it. But, it is cool that you can just pull up your phone, and I was able to pretty quickly identify that there was a spot in our route, and I'll post this online so people can see what we actually did. But I could see that, there was a put out at about mile 6 that would take us, we had about a mile or less back to get to the main route that we were originally biking in on the way in, which would leave us the day before, leaving us an 8-mile ride back home,
which sounded really nice at that point.
Which sounded nice. So yeah, spoiler alert, that's what we did.
Yeah, a little flexibility.
Do you think that was the right call?
Absolutely. Again, after we passed that first campground where we could have gotten out that day, I kind of regretted not going out there. But once we made it to the second takeout, I was like, okay, no, this was a good amount of paddling. It was a really nice bike ride back, for me at least. I know we all experienced several technical difficulties. My phone was messed up, and I was just, ill prepared left and right. I was coughing and sneezing and really not doing great from being so cold the previous couple of days. I know you had experienced some unfortunate food for dinner Saturday night that left you some complications.
Yeah, I forgot to mention that chicken teriyaki from Mountain House. That's off my list from here on out, because I woke up that next day. And that was actually a factor in my personal decision making. I went into that day just feeling like really shitty from, I think, mild food poisoning, maybe, I don't know. Super low energy, and again, maybe it's just a combination of the food and just being out there, but for whatever reason. And then on the bike ride, once we got to the bike ride, I had a nice throw up on one of the climbs.
I think you had more than one.
Yeah, I threw up a couple times just while I was riding. I stopped for one. Anyway, TMI, but hey, that's bike packing.
And then Connor he had like this bulge on his tire. His tire gave through, and it wasn't a flat, but it was like this massive like wart where his tire had failed, and he, being tubeless, just created this bulge that was like giving him a bump every single rotation. And then a half a mile later, his chain broke, and he had left his like toolkit back with the packrafts where we bailed off the river. And so he like turned it into a strider and was going like down these dirt roads with a strider, just running and gliding. And yeah, we all had a heck of a time getting back to the vehicles.
We limped it in for sure, but and then y'all went the wrong way too.
Watch it
after that.
Yeah, my phone was completely soaked, off, dead, not working. We rallied to make it happen.
It was only 8 miles though, so it wasn't too bad. It was a pretty dramatic 8 miles, but I'll say after I got done throwing up, I felt way better, and really the day opened up, and it turned into a beautiful day.
Yeah, the sun came out. It looked like the way I thought it would look the whole time.
Yeah. It was nice to end on that, because we really got to see the true beauty of Arkansas, and we rode, that 8 miles that we had ridden, the previous day or 2 days prior, and we got to see it again because the first day was rainy and nasty, and we got to see it again. Like, man, this is really beautiful, but can't plan the weather, right?
No, you can't. No such thing as bad weather, just bad gear.
Yeah, true. Or being ill prepared. Like we definitely I expected things to, this was the first time, like we said, that a lot of us have done this, three of us had done this. And so I was ready for it to be an adventure. I mean, I know that there was parts unknown and that you have to go in with that mentality that this isn't going to probably go exactly how you plan it out.
Yeah, I mean, none of us had done this route before.
Yeah, no, it's new territory.
And four people like quadruples the opportunity for, mishaps, missteps.
But it was cool, man. We all worked together. Everybody kept their spirits high. Everybody chipped in where they could. And I liked the way that we worked together and made decisions together. And ultimately, we got out together. I mean, it wasn't perfect, but I walk away with a sense of pride and accomplishment having done that as my first trip. And really, in some pretty not great conditions, we did the damn thing.
Yeah, we did.
Yeah, we did.
I gotta say, so I got back to Georgia, and my buddy Andrew, I was telling him about it and how miserable I was by the end of it, essentially. And he said, if you're going on a podcast called Bikes or Death and you get off your bike, you can only expect to die. And I realized at that point that he had a pretty good point there, that pack rafting with Bikes or Death was a bold decision.
Oh man, I almost feel like the only time it went bad though was when we got back on the bikes, though, right?
Yeah, we did well.
Yeah, I love the sentiment though. Sorry to rain on his parade, but sometimes I'm too rational. What's that word?
That'll work.
Yeah, sure. Sometimes I think too much. Sometimes my brain gets in the way of a good time. I finished reading no, I haven't finished. I'm almost done reading How to Change Your Mind.
Excellent.
Yeah, after we talked, I'd started it and hadn't got too far and picked it back up. And so I'm really enjoying that. Just listened to Sam Harris podcast as well that he did recently. So yeah, anyway, tangent, but that's been a big interest of mine ever since we talked. It was already kind of an interest and it's kind of picked up again.
Yeah, I mean that was definitely the conversation topic of Saturday night there. But How to Change Your Mind by Michael Pollan. It's an excellent introduction to anything on that topic. And then any podcasts featuring Rich Doblin and also Robin Carhart Harris is another neuroscientist who's really on the cutting edge of all that stuff. So,
that's another neuroscientist, eh? What's his name again?
Robin is his first name, and then his last name is hyphenated Carhart Harris. And actually, chapter 5 of How to Change Your Mind is essentially all about Robin Carhart Harris. It's the chapter on the neurology.
Episode 242 of the Making Sense podcast with Sam Harris. I don't know who it's with, but I know he's one of those main guys. And
James Fadiman, it looks like.
James Fadiman.
Yeah,
Thank you.
James Fadiman is absolutely one of the OGs. Jim Fadiman, he's the author of The Psychedelic Explorer's Guide. He's been doing psychedelic research since before it was made illegal back in the late 50s, early 60s.
Right.
Early 70s at that point. But yeah, he's been in the game for a long time.
Now he's considered the godfather of microdosing. So it was an interesting interview. If you're interested in this kind of stuff, he's kind of shifted his research from the high dose therapy to microdosing. And he has some thoughts on that too. So
yeah, I would agree that the one of the largest mistakes of the 60s was that we just got the dosage wrong of psychedelics.
How do you feel about Terrence McKenna and his impact?
I think he certainly has provided value when it comes to introducing new veins of thought. I think were he still alive today, and his brother Dennis would probably agree with this, that they might have gone a little too far in some of the far out directions. But that being said, they also provided some invaluable context and ideas for the study overall.
To me, Terrence McKenna is to LSD as Edward Abbey is to public lands.
I had a feeling you were going with Edward Abbey.
Yeah. Well, they're kind of like the bad boys in their in their section. I mean, they're the people who like push the border and maybe take it a little bit too far and find where that edge is. And like my takeaway on stuff like that is that we need those people. I mean, there's
vanguards.
value. Yeah, the vanguards, man. So I don't know. You listen to me too much. You know what I'm gonna say.
Yeah, I think I mean there are certainly many valid criticisms of Edward Abbey, and you've alluded to that in other podcasts as well.
Yeah,
and I think Terence McKenna didn't have as many personal failings as Edward Abbey did, but however may have gone a little far out. Anyone who reads anything about his experience at La Chorrera will understand that there's some pretty far out stuff happening there. But that being said, he's contributed a lot of really, really important ideas to the mysteries and the gaps in our understanding of the history of plant medicines. I think is probably the most general way to put it. We have only recently started really trying to understand the history of these indigenous medicines. And, it's not the easiest thing to track from like an archaeological or anthropological method.
It's an interesting area of research, especially when you start considering, and I mean, I don't know much about this. I know you're pretty knowledgeable about some of the stories of Christianity. You got the Salem witch trials about, how humans have interacted with psychedelics and how it could have potentially influenced where we are today and even ongoing. What I was going to say about him maybe being a bad boy and pushing the edges, I mean, I think that, from my understanding, we had, from the 30s up into the 50s, a lot of good research going on with LSD. Good research, I think, in quotation marks. I know that some of them were just like parties and weren't too regulated and stuff like this. But, from my understanding, Terence McKenna is also the reason why it became a class 1 or schedule 1 drug. Maybe not him directly, but, his influence ultimately led to the suppression of research, which has been suppressed up until just recently. Is that fair?
Okay, so I hate to do this, but I must. I think you might be confusing him with Timothy Leary.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
That's possible. I make mistakes all the time.
Yeah, so in that case, fuck Timothy Leary.
Okay.
Yeah,
that's interesting.
Sure. So I mean, Timothy Leary, like he played his role and he did some stuff, but he was certainly a little too exuberant with his democratization of the substances. He kind of believed that simply providing psychedelic experiences with everyone would be sufficient in promoting like a psychedelic revolution or a revolution of a human consciousness to kind of upend American society and capitalism as a whole and transform the entire world. But as he certainly was aware of, just having the experience isn't enough. It's about your intentionality and about really providing the context necessary for transformative experiences. So Timothy Leary did a lot of damage for the potential that psychedelics had, but there were dozens and dozens, if not hundreds or thousands even, of people doing good and important work throughout the 50s and 60s who were forced underground in the 70s, 80s, 90s, and their legacies are finally being continued and honored now that some of these restrictions are being rolled back around the Western world, at least.
Yeah. Well, thank you for correcting me. Anyone who listens, and you'll know, I've got a touch of dyslexia added with auditory ADD, and in my brain, I get things crossed sometimes, and so you get a Timothy and a Terrence. Yeah, anyway, I make mistakes all the time, so I'm happy.
Terence McKenna is a homie. He's
okay.
He's a great guy. Very high contrast between those two people with similar names.
Yeah. Okay. So Thanks for the correction. Timothy Leary is the man that I have questions about, and that's the one who I was referring to about kind of being a bad boy and setting us back. Again, you're more knowledgeable about this than I am, so I'm just kind of dipping my toes in the water and trying to learn. Yeah, that's just what I heard, that some value came from it, but more damage than good, maybe.
Sure. But yeah, like you were saying, James Fadiman has done excellent things for the field as on the whole. I haven't listened to that episode of the Sam Harris podcast that you mentioned, but it does talk about the Psychedelic Explorer's Guide, which Jim Fadiman wrote, as well as his other book, Your Symphony of Selves, Discover and Understand More of Who We Are. So I'm sure they talk about some really quality stuff. But yeah,
that's good. This just stood out to me. You say I lost my keys, and that's not correct. You've misplaced them, but there's a part of you who knows where it is, right? Like, you placed your keys somewhere. So somewhere in your psyche, you know where it is, but the person right here may not know it. Those are the kinds of things that they're talking through. And they do talk about, obviously, using psychotropics as a way to, for therapy and accessing different parts of your brain that you're not able to. And it's just a good information podcast, everything from, recreational dosing, which they're not really recommending, but I mean, they go through like, this would be a concert dose. This would be a, lose all contact with anything that ever resembled anything you ever understood to be true, and they walk you through the whole progression. I'm curious. So Sam Harris recorded like a 25-minute YouTube video of his experience on a high dose LSD. Have you listened to that?
No, I haven't really listened to much of the Sam Harris stuff. I've just kind of gravitated towards some of the other people who talk about it.
He's not the main guy doing the most work. This trip that he did was the first one he had done in 25 years, so, but I appreciate him because he's got a loud voice and a large platform and is well respected. And so there's that whole idea of, and this is, back in the day, therapists would try the products that they're recommending. So back in the day, if you're peddling LSD, then you're going to take LSD and you're going to try it and understand the effect that that's going to have on your patient and have a familiarity with it. So it's like Michael Pollan. It's like, okay, if you're going to write a book about it, we'll do all the things and then come and tell me about it. But don't just tell me about it. You got to have some experience too.
Even going back to, indigenous medicines and shamanism, I hesitate to speak too much on that, but in a lot of traditions, it's the shaman or the healer who experiences the substance in order to do the healing, and or they will experience alongside of you in order to guide you along with that, rather than just having you do on your own. So yeah, there are certainly a lot of different ways to pursue that. And I think that there are, now a lot of people doing the right work and the right moves to pursue the plausible avenues for, integrating these medicines into society, into healing, the pains and the hurts and the trauma that we have on a whole that traditional Western medicine isn't able to address. Obviously, like, mental health hasn't really had a big breakthrough since the early 90s or so, when SSRIs came out, and they clearly aren't doing the best job ever. A lot of studies show that placebo effect is sometimes equally, if not more effective than some of the SSRIs that we have out there. And then we have really robust studies coming through with, either psychotherapeutic sessions with MDMA, ecstasy, and also psilocybin and other substances that are coming through with some of the most productive results that we've seen in any substance medicine method technique in decades or ever. So,
at least since the 50s, right?
Yeah. And so I think it's important to listen to the right people, and like Rich Doblin, director of MAPS, the Multidisciplinary Association for Psychedelic Studies, anything that has him talking is going to have really quality information. Tim Ferriss does a good job on his podcast of pointing towards some of the most important and influential voices. And then again, James Fadiman, one of the other voices who's, really been here for decades and can talk eloquently about what's happening and provide a lot of good context for people. And yeah, that guy, Robin Carhart Harris, again, he's a sharp guy as far as some of the younger generations go. So,
well, whenever I'm almost done with How to Change Your Mind by Michael Pollan, and then I'll check out Robert Carhart Harris.
yes, yeah. So he doesn't have any books, but he is a scientist who does studies on. He does fMRI scans of people having psychedelic experiences, and he's been on a couple podcasts that are really phenomenal. He does a great job. So, and I recommend going back and rereading chapter 5 of How to Change Your Mind. You'll get a good brush up on that, and you'll be like, oh yeah, this stuff.
Yeah. Like hit it one more time.
Yeah, I re-listen to that one regularly.
Okay, good. Well, thanks, dude. It's always really fun to meet new people, and I appreciate you kind of challenging me to go and experiencing something new. On that trip, I got to know you and know that you're a very thoughtful person who's living an intentional life. And I really enjoyed getting to hang out with you, man, and I learned a lot from you. I mean, even about all the things we just talked about, all the way to, man, camp food and different techniques around camp and all kinds of stuff. So I really enjoyed getting to hang out with you, man. I appreciate the opportunity.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I think the company we had was phenomenal. I certainly learned a lot on that as well. And I really could not have imagined a better way to kind of reintroduce myself into bikepacking and bike rafting as well. After going so long without being able to ride a bike, it really meant a lot to me to be able to have a big experience like that, and kind of have a dream come true too. Being able to meet you and come on this podcast and just talk about some of the things I care about. So thank you.
Yeah, I appreciate it, dude. It was a good time. All right, I guess we should wrap it up. 2.5 hours, not bad. All right, dude, I'm going to go start putting these kids to bed, but I do appreciate it. Learned a lot from you and really enjoyed hanging out. And I appreciate you coming on the podcast. Good luck in LIJ.
All right. I think I'm going to go for a bike ride right now.
Are you?
Yeah,
Good
why
for
not?
you. What time is it there? 7:40?
9:40.
9:40. Perfect.
Yeah.
That's the perfect time to go ride.
Yeah.
Go ride your damn bike.
Yeah, give that K-Light a try.
All right. That's awesome, man. Shout out Carrie from K-Light. All right, buddy. Have a good night. I appreciate it.
All right. Thank you very much.
Peace out. All right. I hope you're still here with us. What a great episode. I couldn't get off the Zoom chat with Ryan. Admittedly, I wasn't trying very hard. It was just so much fun. Sometimes you just get in a groove with somebody, and I'm not one to cut off a conversation. I like to talk, obviously, and some people are critical of that. Some people don't like it when I talk, but it's like, hey, it's my podcast, man. I got to be talking. One area of the episode that we did cut out was a challenge that Ryan extended to listeners of this podcast. And it kind of came in the conversation in a way that had nothing to do with what we were talking about. And so there wasn't a way to just fit it into the episode. But there's a really nice gesture that he made. It is a little self-promoting to play this segment, but as I mentioned before, I'm in the begging business, so this time it feels good to let somebody else do the begging for me. But what follows is a segment that was cut out of the podcast, and it's like 10 minutes long. It's a little bit long. So think about this as a little addendum to today's episode and just insert it anywhere in your mind you'd like to. I don't even remember how it starts, so I don't know how to do a good segue to it. So let's just say, brum, bum, bum, or twinkle, 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 let it roll. You're a patron, aren't you?
I am. I think I was patron number like 7 or 8.
Are you serious?
Yeah.
I'm curious to get your feedback from the early days. Yeah, what like attracted you to the podcast at the very beginning? And you were an early adopter, apparently.
So I saw like the Rockgeist Instagram post about this bikepacking podcast, and I was like, oh, that's perfect. And this was, October 2018. Like, this was back at the inception of everything. And I was like, oh, that's, literally the exact thing that I'm trying to learn about and experience. So it was just, kind of a perfect storm. I feel like my bikepacking trajectory has kind of followed the podcast in a lot of ways. It was born around the same time. I feel like I've grown up with it. So yeah, I've enjoyed being a patron. I need to increase my monthly donation, and I'd like to challenge everyone else who's at that $1 level to pop that up to like $3 or $5 even. And I feel like there's enough of the $1 patrons that if we all, increase that up just a little bit, we could probably have a pretty serious impact. I know my budget is probably almost as tight as anyone's, and there's a lot of opportunity still. Like I feel like I've got some wiggle room. I could probably make something happen. So I'd like to give a challenge to all the other $1 patrons out there, see what they can do.
Challenge hopefully accepted. We'll see. No, I appreciate it, man. I mean, the truth is, you probably know because you're a patron, but I just hit the $500 a month goal, which was a big one. But I was looking today and I've got like 36 new patrons in the last 30 days, which is the most, in a 30-day period. So, I mean, we're getting more than one a day sign up right now. And so I've set my new goal as quitting my day job, which is real estate, so I can focus on this full time, which would be like a dream come true. But yeah, I mean, that's kind of the next goal, is to quit my day job. And I've set up a goal of $2,500 a month to like on Patreon. And it sounds like a lot, but I mean, if you're talking about quitting your job, like it needs, I got 2 daughters. Just some baseline cost. I'm not living in a tiny house, unfortunately. But yeah, I mean, I think the reality is even if everybody that listened to this podcast, even if like a percentage, like half the people that listen to this pod, there's probably about 5,000 listeners ish. And so if half the people gave $1, we would be there. So even, I appreciate the challenge, but I'll also say, hey, the $1 people, I appreciate y'all. And like you mentioned, everybody's finances are different. So, to you and to everybody else, I appreciate anything that you can contribute. And I try to be a good steward of those funds, and it all really does go to hopefully producing a better podcast. So one more question on that, Ryan, since you've been around since the very beginning, what do you think? Has it gotten better, worse, the same?
Oh yeah, no, you're doing a great job of kind of following the sport as it grows and develops, and gains popularity, because we all know, riding your bike for more than one day at a time has been around since the inception of bicycles, but the community is growing. And I think that that's really what the podcast is about. It's not about like, oh, we've started riding our bikes this way. It's more like, okay, now there's more people than ever who have the opportunity and the accessibility to experience this. And there are stories to tell, and there are inspiring stories to tell and to share and to promote. And yeah, as a patron and a listener, I've certainly, valued and benefited from the stories that you've helped share. So I think that, more variety with that is absolutely the name of the game. And
yeah, more and better. That's the goal. More and better.
It's a big pie. There's plenty to go around.
I agree. There's plenty more that I could be doing, and there's plenty of room for other podcasters and other media outlets to join the game, because it's a growing sport. And as we're talking about here on today's podcast, it dips its toes in other waters, which is hiking and rafting and stuff like that. And so it's bikes or death, but I talk about often, mostly it's about getting out in the outdoors and bikes being the preferred method. But there's a lot of great ways to adventure, and it's really leading towards just a huge interest and growing demand for this type of content. And I feel I think that, I don't know, luck. I have been doing it, but and it's not happenstance that I'm putting in the work, but the timing was pretty lucky. It does seem that I kind of hit it at the right time, where it is really becoming there's becoming a large demand for just information on like how to do it and stuff. So
yeah, I think it's easy to see that you were at the right time, the right place, the right motivation, the right commitment. And you linked up with so many other willing players in the sport who are just ready to talk about everything that's happening, because it's such an exciting moment where there's a ton happening all the time, between all the organized rides, the unorganized rides, races, one-off stuff, overnight things, long distance, short distance, single night, people doing year-long international trips. I mean, there's just so much more happening than any one person or dozens of people could even document. And the fact that you were willing to jump in and commit to delivering, a quality podcast to anyone who wants to listen was, there was certainly demand for it. So yeah, it's exciting.
It's been a fun ride, and I appreciate you being along for the journey. It's so cool, man. Like I didn't know any of this whenever I reached out to you. So it's not like, I don't know, you were this like #1 patron fan in the background. You were like, hey, I want to come on the show. It's just like,
I knew.
I like the way the universe works out, man. It's so
Yeah.
cool the way everything kind of lines out. And I definitely feel that way with the podcast. I just feel like, yeah, I put in the work and you have to, but I also have been the benefactor of, like you said, a lot of great guests that have said yes, and a great community that has. I mean, I'm here today because I've been putting in the work, but I've also done it with the help of lots of people in the community and patrons and everybody else. So it's been fun because I don't feel like I'm just out here on my own. I feel like I really am just a part of the community, and yeah, I'm the guy behind the microphone, but
yeah, this is not a one-person podcast.
No, I don't think so. I hope not.
And you know that more than anyone.
Yeah, I do. I try to give shout outs when necessary, or when they're due. All right. Well, should we segue back to the end of the rest of our podcast?
Yeah, let's get
now that we've inflated my ego sufficiently to continue.
You're doing the work at hand.
No, man, I appreciate it. It's a really it's hard to quantify it, to be honest with you. And so maybe I struggle with that, but I feel like probably most people would if they put out a podcast or something like this and it was well received by the community that it was directed to. People are going to, that's just a really good feeling. And I certainly feel that all the time. I enjoy it. So, we got to give credit to you. I mean, you're one of the people that's willing to come on the podcast and share their experiences. And it really is a collection of all these different experiences and people's perspectives and stuff. And that's really the fun part. Is it's not my ideal way of doing it, or it's not this. It's really just a nice collection and a good source where we can all learn and grow from each other's experiences and stuff. And that's a really fun part about it. So yeah, thanks for you coming on and sharing your bike packing and bike rafting knowledge.
Yeah, everyone has a different expression of the sport, and I think that's what's so beautiful about it, is that anyone can do it, and it's just a matter of in what ways people vary in the way that they choose to experience it. And that's the importance of community storytelling.
Another thing that I wanted to touch on that you mentioned was on the educational side, and I do think that that's where I'm starting to this podcast is a good example of providing more information, more what I'm calling bike packing basics, because I, for a long time, didn't feel qualified to really talk about the gear and the how to, because in many respects, I'm a weekend warrior. I'm a full-time dad, whether they're with me or not. That's the truth, but I don't always have my girls with me. But I mean, I'm not a full-time athlete. I'm not training all the time. I know you aren't. You got, your job and stuff, and you fit in the adventures where you can. And so I always felt like I wasn't the person that was qualified to talk about, the how-tos and the ins and outs. But what I've come to learn is that, yeah, I might not be the most experienced, but I have to value my own perspectives and my own information the same way that I would value yours or anybody else in the community, and that everybody can benefit from it, whether, I might be here and somebody else is here, or somebody might be way ahead of, but I mean, hopefully, in the end, it's just a good mix of helpful information, inspiring stories for listeners,
Yeah. I mean, we all have something to learn from anyone that we meet or encounter. And you started doing this 3 years ago or so, You've certainly had a lot more experiences since then. So you're still holding on to your impressions of what it was like when you were starting out. But here you are with that much more experience doing it. So,
and that probably is part of it, is growing in my own comfort zone with it and all that. Yeah. But anyway, yeah, I mean, that's why these kinds of podcasts, I think I'll continue to do more of them where, in the beginning, I've always done very people focused and story focused, and getting to know the people behind the Instagram post or whatever, the video, and I do like that aspect. I think it's important to make that connection between, an elite athlete or, a guy who builds a house out in the middle of nowhere and like understand the steps that it took to get there, and not just like, oh, look at what he has or look at what she did or all this. And I always like to make that parallel, because at the end of the day, we're all human beings and we're all on a journey, and we all started somewhere, and everybody knows that. But I think it's good to have those reminders, because you can talk to like a Lael Wilcox or somebody like and be like, man, she's just a regular person on some
Sorry,
level.
who's that? Who's your... Yes.
Good one. Good one. All right, everyone. I will not keep you any longer. Thank you for being here. Now go ride your damn bike.